Darkness falls hardest when truth is buried, but buried truths have a way of clawing back to the surface. On a foggy evening in Portland's industrial district, two detectives closed in on their target, confident they'd cornered another helpless victim for their twisted game. Elena Rodriguez appeared vulnerable, a Latina woman, alone, seemingly defenseless as she walked to her late-shift job at the medical clinic. They smirked at her steady composure, mistaking discipline for submission. What they failed to recognize was the warrior beneath the scrubs, a former Marine Force recon operator molded by combat and survival. When their intimidation turned to violence, Elena responded with the precision that had kept her alive in 3 tours overseas. That night, hunters became the hunted, and a quiet healer ignited a revolution that would shake the city to its core. Elena Rodriguez adjusted the rearview mirror of her aging Honda Civic as she navigated through the narrow streets of Portland's east side. The October rain drummed steadily against her windshield, and the smell of wet concrete mixed with the lingering aroma of coffee from her thermos. After 14 hours at the community health clinic, her shoulders ached with familiar exhaustion, the good kind that came from helping patients who had nowhere else to turn. The radio played softly, some indie folk station that reminded her of better days when her biggest concern was whether the clinic's supply order would arrive on time. A slight smile crossed her lips as she considered how different this was from her military life. No more desert operations, no more life-or-death decisions in the span of heartbeats. Just healing work, regular patients, and blessed normalcy. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. Elena glanced down to see another text from Carlos, her younger brother. The kid never seemed to rest, always organizing another protest downtown or filing complaints with the city council. Last month, he'd cornered her for 2 hours about police misconduct cases piling up in their neighborhood. You can't stay invisible forever, he'd argued, his brown eyes burning with the same intensity their father had possessed. You have training, skills. People need someone like you to stand up and fight back. Elena had brushed off his pleas the same way she always did. I've had enough conflict to last 3 lifetimes, she'd told him. Some of us just want to heal the world quietly. The dashboard clock showed 11:23 p.m. Traffic was nearly non-existent, most people either asleep or safely inside. Elena checked her mirrors, an old habit from her reconnaissance days that had never faded. That's when she first spotted the unmarked sedan 2 blocks behind, maintaining perfect distance. Probably nothing, she whispered, though her spine straightened instinctively. She checked her speed, right at the limit. Her nursing license was current, insurance paid up, no reason for concern. But after 3 minutes of the same car mimicking her every turn, the familiar weight of suspicion settled in her chest. This wasn't paranoia. This was pattern recognition honed by years of staying alive in hostile territory. Elena took a deliberate left turn down Morrison Street, watching as the sedan followed without hesitation. Her pulse quickened, not from fear but from the cold calculation that had kept her squad alive in Kandahar. The construction zone appeared suddenly, orange cones funneling traffic into a single lane between towering steel barriers. Elena's hands tightened on the wheel as she realized the tactical disadvantage: no escape routes, limited visibility, perfect for an ambush. The sedan accelerated, pulling alongside her before cutting sharply into her lane. Elena braked hard as the car forced her toward the construction barriers. Her Civic came to a stop against the concrete divider, trapped between the sedan and the steel walls. 2 men emerged immediately, moving with the predatory confidence of those who'd done this before. Detective Ray Morrison approached from the driver's side, his hand resting casually on his service weapon. His partner, Detective Kyle Nash, circled to the passenger side, blocking any potential escape route. Both wore plainclothes, but their badges hung prominently from their belts, a show of authority meant to intimidate. "Evening, lady," Morrison called out, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "Step out of the vehicle." "Nice and slow." Elena complied, her movements deliberate and controlled. Every instinct screamed danger, but she kept her hands visible, her expression neutral. "Is there a problem, officers?" Nash laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the concrete walls. "Problem? Yeah, there's a problem. What's a girl like you doing in this part of town at this hour?" "I work at the clinic on Division," Elena replied evenly. "I'm heading home." Morrison stepped closer, his breath reeking of alcohol and stale cigarettes. "Division Clinic, huh? That the place that treats all those druggies and illegals?" Elena's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "We provide medical care to anyone who needs it." "How noble," Nash sneered. "Let's see some ID, sweetheart. And maybe you can explain why someone like you thinks she belongs in this neighborhood." The racist undertone was unmistakable. Elena reached slowly for her wallet, every movement calculated to appear non-threatening. "My license shows I live 6 blocks from here. I've been in this community for 4 years." Morrison snatched her license, studying it with exaggerated suspicion. "Elena Rodriguez," he read aloud, making her name sound like an accusation. And you expect us to believe you can afford rent in Eastside on a nurse's salary? I work double shifts, Elena said, maintaining eye contact despite every fiber of her being screaming at the injustice. I pay my taxes and serve my community. Nash moved closer, invading her personal space. Serve your community? Or enable criminals? We know what goes on at that clinic. Drug deals, harboring fugitives, treating gang members without reporting bullet wounds. We follow all legal reporting requirements, Elena replied, her military training keeping her voice level despite the building rage. We're healthcare providers, not law enforcement. Morrison's hand moved to his gun. Maybe it's time we taught you about law enforcement. Up close and personal. The threat was clear, unmistakable. Elena's combat instincts surged to the surface, her body automatically shifting into a defensive stance. These weren't peace officers, they were predators who'd selected her as prey. You won't be walking away from this, Nash whispered, drawing his weapon with practiced ease. Time to learn some respect. Elena saw Morrison's gun clear its holster a split second later. Time slowed, her marine training kicking in like muscle memory. She rolled left behind a concrete barrier as the first shots rang out, the sound deafening in the narrow construction zone. Sparks flew as bullets struck the steel barriers. Elena pressed herself against the concrete, her mind automatically cataloging the tactical situation. 2 shooters, limited cover, civilian construction workers somewhere nearby. She could hear their panicked shouts and running footsteps, more gunshots echoed through the night. Elena moved like smoke between the barriers, using every piece of cover available. Her white clinic jacket made her too visible, so she stripped it off, leaving her in dark scrubs that blended better with the shadows. Nash appeared around a barrier, his gun raised. Elena struck with lightning precision, a joint lock that sent his weapon spinning away, followed by a strike to his solar plexus that dropped him to his knees. She retrieved his gun and disappeared back into the maze of construction equipment before Morrison could get a clear shot. Officer down. Morrison screamed into his radio. Shots fired. We need backup. Elena knew she had minutes before the entire Portland PD descended on the construction zone. She had to get out, but more importantly, she had to survive long enough to tell the truth about what had happened. These weren't officers conducting a legitimate stop, this was an execution attempt, and she had just become the city's most wanted fugitive. She slipped through a gap in the barriers and disappeared into the Portland night, leaving behind her quiet life as a healer and embracing once again the warrior she'd tried so hard to bury. Across town in his corner office at Portland Police Bureau headquarters, Captain Vincent Kroger watched the body cam footage with cold fury. His weathered face, scarred from 25 years on the force, twisted into a grimace as he observed his carefully orchestrated plan falling apart on screen. Elena Rodriguez wasn't supposed to fight back. She was supposed to be another casualty in his war against the undesirable elements flooding into his city. Instead, she had humiliated his best men and exposed their operation to potential scrutiny. Kroger poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and began making calls. By dawn, the narrative would be set in stone. Elena Rodriguez, a dangerous veteran with PTSD, had ambushed 2 decorated detectives during a routine traffic stop. The media would eat it up, another story of military training gone wrong, of immigrants bringing violence to peaceful communities. His phone buzzed. The mayor's chief of staff, undoubtedly calling to demand answers. Kroger let it go to voicemail. Politicians were useful tools, but this situation required a more direct approach. He activated his computer and began editing the body cam footage, removing the racist taunts, the illegal detention, the first weapon drawn by his officers. In its place, he crafted a story of unprovoked violence by a woman who clearly couldn't handle civilian life. Within hours, local news stations were running the edited footage. Former Marine attacks Portland police screamed across every headline. Social media exploded with outrage, though it was divided. Those who knew Elena defended her character, while others absorbed the department's narrative without question. Elena sat in the basement of St. Michael's Community Center, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Father Miguel Santos, the elderly priest who ran the center, had offered sanctuary without hesitation when she'd appeared at his door just before sunrise. I saw the news, he said softly, his kind eyes reflecting decades of witnessing injustice. But I also know your heart, Elena. You've saved dozens of lives at that clinic. You don't attack without cause. Carlos paced the small room like a caged animal, his laptop open to social media feeds that grew more hostile by the hour. They're destroying you online, he said, his voice thick with rage. Calling you a cop killer, a terrorist. Half the city wants you dead. Elena studied the edited footage playing on the screen. The lies were sophisticated, believable. Without the full context, she looked like the aggressor, a trained killer who'd snapped under pressure. They're not just targeting me, she realized aloud. They're using this to justify every abuse of power, every act of violence against our community. Every person who looks like us becomes a potential threat in their narrative. Father Santos nodded gravely. Evil often wears the badge of authority. But truth has a way of surfacing, even when buried deep. A knock at the basement door made them all freeze. Carlos reached for the pistol he'd started carrying since Elena went underground. But the voice that called out was familiar, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the clinic director who'd become Elena's closest friend and confidant. Jennifer slipped into the basement, her usually composed demeanor shaken. I came as soon as I could get away. The FBI raided the clinic this morning. They're claiming we're harboring fugitives and treating criminals without reporting. Elena's heart sank. Her fight for survival was destroying the lives of innocent people who'd done nothing but try to help their community. There's something else, Jennifer continued, pulling out her phone. I managed to record part of their raid. Listen to this. The audio was scratchy but clear enough to understand Captain Kroger's voice giving orders to his tactical team. Find anything we can use to discredit that place. Plant evidence if you have to. We need the public to see them as criminals, not heroes. Elena's eyes widened. Here was proof of the conspiracy, evidence that this went far beyond two rogue detectives. But how could they get it to the public when the entire system was working against them? Marcus Thompson had built his career on asking uncomfortable questions and refusing to accept comfortable lies. At 38, the investigative journalist had exposed corruption in City Hall, corporate malfeasance, and police misconduct across 3 different cities. His reputation for fearless reporting had earned him both Pulitzer consideration and death threats in equal measure. That in his cluttered downtown apartment, surrounded by whiteboards covered in notes, photos, and connecting lines that mapped out the Elena Rodriguez case. Something about the official story stank like week-old fish, and Marcus had learned to trust his instincts about these things. His secure phone buzzed, a message from an encrypted account he'd never seen before. Multnomah Library, 3rd floor, Philosophy section. Come alone. Bring recording equipment. Marcus grabbed his gear and headed out into the Portland drizzle. The library was nearly empty at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, just a few students and homeless individuals seeking warmth. He found the philosophy section and waited, pretending to browse Nietzsche while keeping watch. Elena appeared beside him like a ghost, moving with the silent precision that had kept her alive in combat zones. Even expecting her, Marcus was startled by how quietly she could move. Mr. Thompson, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for coming. Marcus studied her face, tired but determined, haunted but not broken. This wasn't the crazed killer from the news footage. This was someone fighting for her life against impossible odds. I've seen the official story, Marcus said carefully. But I make my living finding the truth. What really happened that night? Elena pulled out a flash drive, her movements economical and precise. Everything's on here. The real body cam footage, audio recordings from the clinic raid, communications between Captain Kroger and his team. They tried to execute me, and when that failed, they decided to destroy me through lies. Marcus accepted the drive, understanding its significance. This could end careers, maybe even result in federal charges. But it also makes you and me targets. I spent 3 tours in Afghanistan dodging IEDs and Taliban snipers, Elena replied. Captain Kroger doesn't scare me. But I can't fight this alone. The community needs to see the truth. Marcus nodded, already planning his approach. Give me 48 hours. I'll have this story ready to broadcast, with backup plans if they try to shut us down. For the first time since the shooting, Elena felt a glimmer of hope. The weight of fighting alone had been crushing her, but now she had an ally, someone with the platform and courage to tell her story. Captain Kroger's community safety rally was a masterpiece of propaganda. Held in Pioneer Courthouse Square, it drew hundreds of supporters who believed they were standing up for law and order. Uniformed officers lined the perimeter while Kroger took the podium, his commanding presence filling the space. We face a clear and present danger, he announced, his voice carrying across the square. Military-trained individuals who bring the violence of foreign wars to our peaceful streets. Who target our brave officers simply for doing their jobs. The crowd roared approval, but scattered throughout were Elena's supporters, community members who knew her character, veterans who understood the truth about PTSD, medical professionals who'd worked alongside her. Their protests were quickly drowned out by the majority. Elena watched from a nearby building, her heart breaking as she saw her city tearing itself apart. Carlos stood beside her, his face grim with determination. He's turning neighbor against neighbor, Elena said quietly. Using fear to justify violence. As if summoned by her words, Kroger's tactical team moved into action. They began aggressively dispersing the counter-protesters, using pepper spray and batons on anyone who dared question the official narrative. Elena watched in horror as elderly community leaders were shoved to the ground, as young activists were beaten for holding signs demanding justice. We have to do something, Carlos said, his hand moving toward his concealed weapon. Elena grabbed his wrist. No. That's what he wants, more violence to justify his actions. We fight this with truth, not bullets. But as she watched the brutality unfold below, Elena felt the warrior's rage building inside her chest. She'd spent years trying to heal the wounds of war, only to find the same evil wearing a badge in her own hometown. Marcus Thompson's emergency broadcast interrupted regular programming across Portland at 6 p.m. on Wednesday evening. Station Coin had initially resisted running the story, but the weight of evidence was too overwhelming to ignore. Good evening, Portland, Marcus began, his tired face alive with purpose. I'm Marcus Thompson, and tonight we bring you the truth about the Elena Rodriguez case, a truth that powerful people have tried desperately to hide. The unedited footage played in crystal clarity. Morrison and Nash's racist taunts, their illegal detention of Elena, their first draw of weapons while her hands remained visible and empty. The audio was devastating. Morrison's whispered threat, "You won't be walking away from this," followed by Nash's cruel laughter. The Portland Police Bureau has claimed that Elena Rodriguez attacked 2 officers without provocation. Marcus continued over the footage. But as you can clearly see, this was a planned execution, thwarted only by Ms. Rodriguez's military training and survival instincts. Social media exploded within minutes. The hashtag Justice for Elena began trending nationally as the footage spread across every platform. Community leaders who had remained silent suddenly found their voices. Veterans organizations issued statements supporting Elena's actions as clear self-defense, but Marcus wasn't finished. He played the audio from the clinic raid, Kroger's voice clearly ordering evidence to be planted. He showed financial records linking Kroger to white supremacist groups, documented patterns of harassment against Latino businesses and community centers. This isn't just about one woman fighting for her life, Marcus concluded. This is about a systematic campaign of terror designed to drive undesirable populations from Portland through intimidation and violence. Elena Rodriguez isn't the criminal here, she's the witness they tried to silence. The response was swift and decisive. Within hours of Marcus's broadcast, the FBI announced a federal investigation into the Portland Police Bureau. The Department of Justice issued a statement promising a comprehensive review of civil rights violations. Oregon's governor called for Captain Kroger's immediate suspension pending investigation. Elena watched the news coverage from Father Santos's basement, surrounded by Carlos, Jennifer, and a growing circle of supporters who'd risked everything to stand with her. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to hope that justice might actually be possible, but Kroger wasn't going down without a fight. His final gambit was desperate and dangerous, a raid on St. Michael's Community Center, ostensibly searching for Elena but really intended to send a message to anyone who dared support her. The tactical team hit the building at dawn, expecting to find Elena sleeping peacefully in the basement. Instead, they found her waiting, dressed in black fatigues and armed with weapons taken from Morrison and Nash. The former Marine had transformed the basement into a defensive position worthy of Kandahar. The standoff lasted 3 hours, with news helicopters circling overhead and crowds gathering outside. Elena's voice came over a bullhorn, clear and unwavering. I will not be murdered for the crime of defending myself. I will not be silenced for speaking truth to power. Detective Nash, still recovering from their first encounter but driven by wounded pride, led the entry team. He wanted personal revenge, wanted to be the one who brought down the woman who'd humiliated him, but Elena was no longer the quiet healer he'd tried to kill. She was a warrior defending her community, and warriors don't surrender to corruption. The firefight was brief but decisive. Nash fell first, followed by 2 more officers who'd joined Kroger's conspiracy. Elena emerged unharmed but forever changed, knowing she could never return to her old life. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity as Elena's case finally reached trial. Judge Patricia Yamamoto, known for her integrity and fairness, presided over proceedings that would determine not just Elena's fate but the future of police accountability in Portland. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michael Chen, had initially pushed for first-degree murder charges. But as the evidence mounted, body cam footage, witness testimonies, financial records linking Kroger to extremist groups, the charges were quietly reduced to voluntary manslaughter with a recommendation for self-defense consideration. Elena's legal team, headed by civil rights attorney Rosa Gutierrez, presented a compelling case of systematic harassment, attempted murder, and conspiracy. The unedited footage spoke for itself, showing clearly who had drawn weapons first and who had issued death threats. Detective Nash, now permanently disabled and facing federal charges of his own, took the stand to save himself from life in prison. His testimony was devastating to the prosecution's case, confirming Elena's account of the planned execution and Kroger's orders to eliminate community troublemakers. We were told she was dangerous, Nash admitted under cross-examination, his voice barely audible. Captain Kroger said she was organizing resistance against the department, that she needed to be stopped before she could cause more problems. By stopped, what did you understand that to mean? Rosa asked. Nash looked directly at Elena for the first time since the shooting. We understood it to mean killed. The courtroom erupted. Judge Yamamoto called for order, but the damage was done. A Portland police detective had just admitted to conspiracy to commit murder on the witness stand. Captain Kroger never took the stand. By the time the trial reached its midpoint, he'd been arrested on federal charges of civil rights violations, conspiracy, and racketeering. The investigation had uncovered a network of corruption reaching into the mayor's office and the district attorney's staff. On the final day of testimony, Elena took the stand in her own defense. She spoke calmly and clearly about her military service, her work at the clinic, her commitment to healing rather than harming. But when asked about the night of the shooting, her voice hardened with the steel of someone who'd survived combat. I spent 3 tours in Afghanistan fighting for the values this country claims to represent, she said, looking directly at the jury. Freedom, justice, equality under law. I never imagined I'd have to fight for those same values on the streets of Portland, against the very people sworn to protect them. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Elena Rodriguez was acquitted on all charges, with the jury foreman reading a statement that condemned the Portland Police Bureau's actions and called for comprehensive reform. 6 months later, Elena stood before a crowd of thousands gathered in Tom McCall Waterfront Park. The Justice for All rally had drawn supporters from across the Pacific Northwest, veterans, community activists, healthcare workers, and ordinary citizens who'd been inspired by her story of courage under fire. Carlos stood to her right, now serving as her chief of staff in her new role as director of the Portland Police Accountability Commission. To her left stood Officer Maria Santos, a young Latina cop who'd risked her career to testify about corruption within the department. Maria represented the possibility of real change, of law enforcement that served all communities equally. I never wanted to be a symbol, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly across the crowd. I never wanted to be a leader in any movement. I just wanted to heal people and live quietly in the community I love. The crowd listened in respectful silence, understanding that they were witnessing something historic, not just a speech, but a transformation. But sometimes the world doesn't let you choose your battles, Elena continued. Sometimes evil forces you to stand up and fight, whether you want to or not. What matters is how you fight, with truth or lies, with justice or vengeance, with unity or division. She gestured toward the crowd, which reflected Portland's beautiful diversity, black and white, Latino and Asian, young and old, united in their demand for justice. We've proven that truth can overcome lies, that courage can defeat corruption, that communities united are stronger than any force trying to divide us. But this is just the beginning. Real change takes time, dedication, and the willingness to keep fighting even when the cameras go away and the headlines move on to other stories. Captain Kroger was now serving 15 years in federal prison. Detective Morrison had pled guilty to conspiracy charges and was testifying against other corrupt officers in exchange for a reduced sentence. The Portland Police Bureau was under federal oversight, with new training requirements and accountability measures that were being studied by departments nationwide. Elena's voice rose one final time, carrying the strength forged in combat and tempered by her commitment to healing. To every person who's ever faced injustice and felt powerless to fight back, you are not alone. To every community that's been targeted by those who abuse their authority, we stand with you. Together we rise. Together we heal. Together we ensure this never happens again. The crowd's answering roar echoed across the Willamette River, a thunder of determination and hope that would resonate far beyond Portland's city limits. Elena Rodriguez had begun as a victim, but she stood now as a victor, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed that justice was worth fighting for. The phoenix had risen from the ashes of corruption, and nothing would ever be the same. Elena returned to her work as a healer, but now she split her time between the clinic and her role overseeing police accountability. The community health center had been rebuilt and expanded, serving more patients than ever before. Her story had inspired donations and volunteer support from across the country. Marcus Thompson won a Pulitzer Prize for his investigation, but more importantly to him, he'd helped expose a network of corruption that had plagued Portland for decades. His follow-up series on police reform became required reading at journalism schools nationwide. Officer Santos was promoted to sergeant and became the face of the department's reform efforts, proving that good cops could be part of the solution rather than obstacles to change. She worked closely with Elena's commission to implement new training programs that emphasized de-escalation and community engagement, and in the basement of St. Michael's Community Center, Father Santos continued to offer sanctuary to those seeking refuge from injustice, knowing that Elena's courage had made his mission safer for everyone who needed help. The fight for justice never truly ends, but sometimes if people are brave enough to stand up and speak truth to power, it wins important victories that light the way forward for generations to come.